Today is the feast of the Transfiguration of Jesus before his inner circle of followers, namely Peter, James, and John. In 20 words, Mark describes one of the most momentous events in Jesus' ministry. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach. Then, while Jesus is talking with Elijah and Moses, a cloud came casting a shadow over them, and from that cloud came God the Father. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. So exactly what is the significance of the Transfiguration? According to one commentary, Sakrapagina, it is, and I quote, a helpful approach to the text to say that it is a Christophany, that is, a manifestation of the revelation of who Jesus really is. The term is a variation of the word theophany, a scene in which God reveals God's self to humans. For example, the encounter between God and Moses in Exodus, namely the burning bush. Now, in the Transfiguration, Jesus is revealed as a glorious figure, someone that is superior to both Moses and Elijah, and is called the Son of God by a heavenly voice. Put it in more clear language, Jesus is being revealed to Peter, James, and John for who he really is, the Son of God in all of his glory, greater than even the two pillars of the Old Testament, Elijah and Moses. So what was the purpose of the Transfiguration for Peter, James, and John? Why were they being given this glimpse? I think the answer is pretty simple. Jesus knew that he would soon have to enter into his passion, to be arrested, crucified, died, buried, and rise from the dead. Notice that he tells Peter, James, and John as they are walking down the mountain not to relate what they had seen to anyone except when the Son of Man has risen from the dead. The purpose of the Transfiguration for Jesus' inner circle is to give them hope for when they are tested and struggle with who Jesus is, namely the Son of God. If you remember, when Jesus was arrested, all the disciples ran away, including Peter, James, and John. Indeed, Peter even denied Jesus 3 times before the cock crowed. That is why the resurrected Jesus asks Peter 3 times if he loves him. Put another way, the Transfiguration gave Peter, James, and John hope that Jesus really truly is the Son of God, because they saw with their own eyes Jesus in all of his glories, if but for a moment. Of course, Peter, James, and John were to eventually see the resurrected Jesus. But if you look at the description of the resurrected Jesus, it does not compare with the brilliance of his appearance on that mountain, coupled with God saying, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." Now, the next level is the question arises as to what the purpose of the Transfiguration would serve the community of Mark for whom the gospel was being written. I suspect the answer would be similar to that of Peter, James, and John, namely the hope that Jesus truly is the Son of God and will one day return. Undoubtedly, these early Christian communities were being persecuted for their beliefs by both the Jews and Roman authorities. The idea of Jesus being an earthly king, like David, had been superseded by a much broader understanding that Jesus is the Son of God for all people, Jews and Gentiles, free and slaves, men and women, everyone. So then, what purpose does the Transfiguration have for us today? You guessed it, hope. Hope that we're still patiently waiting for his return, and that he will eventually return. It would be nice, wouldn't it, if we could all see the transfigured Jesus? But I'm afraid that many of us probably would still doubt, even though they saw him. Hope is based on faith, which comes from God. Now, I suspect many of you have had a mountaintop experience when you knew deep down in your heart that all this stuff that we say about Jesus is true? I had such a moment. It happened when I had, of all things, back surgery in 2018. While I was under anesthesia, I had a dream like no dream I've ever had. In my dream, I did not have any sensations of seeing or hearing. Rather, I could only touch and taste. Everything was very dry. My mouth was parched. I remember repeating over and over again, "I love you, Lord. I love you, Lord." Then I felt the tiniest drop of what I knew was heaven on my tongue. I felt completely satisfied and also had the sense that that one drop is all that I need for the rest of my life. That's the end of the dream. And I remember opening my eyes and seeing the recovery room where there were all sorts of medical monitors beeping and everything, and my initial thought was, is this purgatory? Then a nurse came to me and asked, "Are you okay? Do you need ice?" And I said, "Yes." And after that first bit of ice, I asked for more, and then I started talking in such a joyful way. I began telling everyone I came in contact with that I truly believed God is real and that I had tasted a drop of heaven. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, well, that's just the anesthesia, right? That's what it was. It was just the anesthesia. That joy went on not for just a few hours, but it went on for days into weeks. And I still remember that moment when I woke up, and I still remember that dream. So I remember being taken to a small room for outpatients who weren't going to stay the night, and hopefully I wasn't going to stay the night, and I didn't have to stay the night. Janet, my wife, was there, and Jean Pennington, who was bringing me communion, came into the room. And so I immediately started telling them about my dream and asked them if either of them had ever had such an experience. And Janet shook her head no. But then Jean said, "Yes, when my husband died." And she also said this, and this is why I'm telling the story. She said, "Everything has changed, but everything is the same." That is why I tell the story. Isn't that what Peter, James, and John experienced? On that mountain, everything had changed, but as they walked down the mountain, everything was the same. Now, I'm not saying I had a divine revelation by any means under anesthesia. I think of it more as my mountaintop experience for those times when I'm in the valley of despair. That memory of that tiny drop of heaven rekindles my hope and my joy in my Savior, Jesus Christ.